the most dangerous thing that can happen to a child is that they experience something dangerous online, or they see something scary, or someone threatens, a million things can happen in the digital world. And the most dangerous thing is if they sit alone with this.
Welcome, Ingenious baby.
Jessica, thank you again so much for coming. Your book, The Danish Way of Parenting, was so impactful for me, one of my most popular videos, and I'm really excited to talk about your new project, Raising Digital Citizens. And I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about that and what was the inspiration behind creating that project.
Yeah, I wrote The Danish Way of Parenting quite a few years ago now, and I had smaller kids at the time. And although I think it's something that you can, apply for any age, and some people say it's not just for parents, it's a philosophy of living. But as my kids got older, I was coming up on the sort of rite of passage, which is something that many parents are facing now. And that is when to give a phone, and if not a phone, more digital freedom. And so I discovered these Raising Digital Citizens conversation cards, which basically provide a tool for you as a parent to talk to your kids about all of the elements of what it means to be a good person in the digital world, just like in the physical world. The inspiration, again, the digital citizenship program. So in Denmark, education is based on both academics and on how to be a good person. So the word education is called uddannelse and dannelse, and it's 50-50. So it's very different than our education system. There's such a big focus on how to be a good person, a good citizen. And I think very often we take for granted that kids know how to do a lot of things. And so basically the approach is that as parents, we often know how to prepare our kids to cross the road, to be polite, we want them to be empathic, we want them to be kind, but we don't know how to do this in the digital world. Or more often, I think we take for granted that they know how to do these things. Mm-hmm. And so the categories in the cards are basically all the things that we would do in the real world. It's not, like I said, it's not technical necessarily.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful. Like I said, I actually have the cards myself. I use them with my kids, and it is amazing. Like the conversation that I had let them, they're online, like you said, regardless, through school, friends. And there are a lot of things in those cards that I didn't even think about to even talk about, that I didn't know about. And I even asked them too. They were surprised at some of the things they learned through our conversations that they would not have known otherwise. Can you talk through what are the categories and what are the thoughts behind the categories that you have created?
I will just preface this with, many parents who get the cards. I think the challenge sometimes is they get the cards and they think like it's going to be easy, it's going to be fun, it's going to be something, but it actually requires a little bit of effort, and it requires time, and it requires an investment. But what we have found across the board is that once you start making the investment in time, it's usually the kids that want to keep doing them, right? Because they actually really like that you're interested.
You know, what's really interesting is that when I first brought out the cards, my kids were a little bit resistant. They're like, why do we have to do this? And then once we had a few conversations, they actually proactively want to talk about them. They actually, on the way to school, a couple of times they brought them in the car and we were talking about gaming and other things. They thought it was really interesting. I thought it was interesting that they were proactively asking me to talk about them. But it did take some effort and some upfront getting them used to the idea of it. But after we opened it up, they were very, very receptive.
Wow. I just got goosebumps. I'm so happy to hear that. It's communication, critical thinking, consent, well-being, gaming, and safety. So these are the main categories. And the questions, a lot of them, you probably discovered, are really encouraging you to open up a discussion rather than just giving you the right answer. It's really creating this relationship, creating this openness around their digital life so that you can have a conversation that lasts through life And I
Mm.
think what happens a lot of times today is that because we don't often ask into their digital world, and this is very much due to the fact that one, we don't really know, and two, we're so inundated with fear and control and like banning and how everything is bad that it's our natural reaction sometimes is just to push it away. And so the idea behind this is like open up for really creating this relationship, which again, we know from research, much research, that this kind of relationship is the best protection.
Yeah.
You can control, you can ban, you can do all of these things, but our kids are going to find ways around this. They're going to have sleepovers with their friends where they're going to be exposed to it. And so the more that we actually talk to them about what do you do in certain situations? Who are your most trusted adults to go to? What do you like to do in your digital world? What are influencers? What's fake news? All of these things, which becomes an education both for the kids and for the parents.
And that's interesting that you mentioned like the control and the fear. And I think I used to be more so like, you're not doing this. We can't have this. And they're, like you said, they're going to have it anyway. I think there are two kinds of parents. One that don't have any oversight and letting their kids kind of be online doing whatever and not really knowing what they're doing. And then other parents who are absolutely technology and the internet, like just know. And I think you're right that there has to be somewhere in the middle where you actually, that is going to be something they're exposed to, and you need to have those conversations with them, because even if you're saying no and you're being very strict, that could backfire too. I'm so like no technology, like really minimize it, and I don't really allow it so much. But then after we started talking about it, like, hey, I am open to hearing more about your digital world. And then they became more engaged and more willing to talk to me. And like really now they're proactively bringing him last week to school. They brought them in the car. And
I've had a couple of situations where my son in particular was exposed to, a dangerous situation. And I know that it's because we did the cards together that he knew what to do. I also tell parents that the most dangerous thing that can happen to a child is that they experience something dangerous online or they see something scary or someone threatens, a million things can happen in the digital world. And the most dangerous thing is if they sit alone with this
mm-hmm,
because they're
mm-hmm.
afraid to come and talk to us.
Right. Can you explain the situation that happened with your son?
Well, I'll preface it with some of the discussions that you have, and maybe you've had them as well, are things like, who do you go to? Who are your most trusted adults? Who would you go to if something scary happened? We also talked about a lot of different pranks or things that can happen online. And so one day, my son came and he was just shaking, crying, really, really upset. And he had someone had in a game had threatened to. He said, "I've hacked your account. I have your passport. I'm going to steal all your dad's money." It was really scary. And it was also scary for me because I thought my initial reaction was, of course, like, oh my God, did you give away, your password? Did you give away personal information? Or were you friends with someone? And he said, no, mommy, because we talked about all these things. So he knew also, because this is in the safety section, you talk a lot about like, what are things you don't give away, etc. And so he hadn't done any of these things. So we sort of had to like troubleshoot it. And I said, okay, so we worked through it. But he'd also gone to his sister because she was on his list of trusted people to go to. She's older. And she was helping as well. So this was also really good. Anyway, it turns out that it was a boy in his class and his big brother that were pranking him.
Mm.
This was a very serious prank. And these pranks happen so much more often than parents realize. The fact that he knew to come to us, he knew we could work through it together, we could handle it together. And if he'd been afraid, like, I know mommy doesn't like me playing games, I know she doesn't want me being friends with people online, he might have sat with that by himself. And we know, like, there's story after story after story, or someone that gets bullied on social media, etc. These conversations are not supposed to be like a quiz. They're not supposed to be give me the right answer. The idea is that they generate the answers, and together you set your values for your family.
Everyone has their own values and things around that, which I love about the card. There's not a right or wrong with a lot of them.
Yeah, there's and I'll just say this last thing because I think this is interesting to point out. There's something called the generational effect,
Mm-hmm.
which basically means that when you do things like flashcards or talking together, and your kids come up with, they have to think about the answer, they have to use critical thinking, etc. Generational theory says that we learn things much better and we remember them much longer when we generate ideas in this way. So, some parents say, oh, why don't we just have an app for this? But actually, we know that the children will retain this information much more. They will remember it much better, precisely through this kind of interaction where we're like, huh, okay, well, what do you think about that?
I love that the digital citizens agreement too, the part of the process. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
I would love to. Have you made it yet, or you're not there
Not
yet?
yet. We're still going through like cards and questions and yeah. And so we're doing that first, and then we're going to go through agreements. But they had to warm up to the idea a little bit first.
And how far away are you? I'm curious, like in your journey with, when will you do the phone, or will you do a phone, or?
I think it'll have to probably be pretty soon. My son will be going into sixth grade next year, which is junior high. And I think, as they get older, they're going to just need it in order for like emergencies, or if they're off with their friends somewhere. I think it will be important.
It's usually between going fifth to sixth grade or sixth to seventh grade. That is
Yeah.
that moment, and you're starting to come up on it. So
Yes.
it's really great you're doing the cards now. This milestone, this rite of passage, when they really need to get a phone, this preparation, like they become so open to it as well. They
Yeah.
become open to the talking to you. They become open to the learning, because also it is like giving them keys to a car. So coming back to this idea about the agreement, the nice thing about the agreement is, like, this is something we encourage to use before they get the phone, right? And the agreement,
Mm-hmm.
we have it on raisingdigitalcitizens.com. We give some ideas for how to make the agreement, how to make it collaborative, how to encourage your child to come up with some of the, because we want them to feel responsible.
Yeah.
So you go through these cards, you go through this care process, we call it. The C is for connecting. And you build this trust, you build this idea that you're interested in what they have to say. You're interested in learning from them. You're interested in setting values together that are the values of your family and your family's boundaries and your family's, what you agree to. So the agreement is like, that's the last step before getting the
Mm-hmm.
phone.
Yes. So can you give an example of what was in your agreement, for example?
Okay,
Because I know
so
every family's different.
every family's different. And again, so we give some like basic sort of good all around examples that you can print out, but we very much encourage that you make your own as well. Because
Mm-hmm.
again, the more you can personalize it, the more your kids feel responsibility. Some of the ones that we did were having your phone outside of the room before you go to bed, for
Mm-hmm.
example. Now that was in the beginning, and the thing about the agreement is it's a living document, because things will change. You have to keep having conversations. There will be new apps. Just like you see, this is the very interesting thing about the digital world. You see your children change in the physical world, and you see them develop, and you realize that you have to parent to their age as they
Mm-hmm.
grow. And then it becomes the same in the digital world, because they
Yeah.
mature, they get different experiences, different apps become popular. There's also different quality things they can have access to develop themselves, right? But they mature in a different way. So coming back to the agreement, this is something we update with our kids, let's say every 6 months,
Yeah.
or every year. So for example, as my son got bigger, um, he wanted to get like a new app, and we had to have a big conversation about it. And I was very impressed how much he knew, and how much like I was very impressed how much I feel was in him about being a responsible person. But we
Mm-hmm.
had to add some new boundaries around that. And another one we had was you have to always answer your phone.
Yeah.
You always take like to always take my messages, or respond so I know where you are. What were some of the other ones? Being responsible with your phone. I mean, there's also the element of just treating it with respect. I mean, it's a very expensive piece of, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
So, some kids are more forgetful than other kids. And yeah, so those are the ones off the top of my head that I can remember. What were some of the other ones? Being kind and respectful. It's like basic rules of thumb around like never like a mean message.
Mm-hmm.
Never like a mean comment, for example.
Yeah.
Um, this was more for my daughter because like my son, we had to talk a lot about gaming.
Uh-huh.
And my daughter, we talked a lot about etiquette in social media, and even if they're not on social media, not to be too gender specific, but I do find generally girls do experience much more with group dynamics and, various issues, communication
Mm-hmm.
issues. So it was super important with my daughter that we talked a lot about like how to handle various situation with their
Yeah.
friends. And I think that was really helpful for her. We talk also about pranks.
Mm.
And this is something actually I would say, even if it's for anyone who's not gaming, it's the cards about pranks are also important because there's so much innocent pranking going on. Just like in the
Yeah.
real world. They think they're
Yeah.
joking around, they're at a slumber party, they make a fake account. Like, you can't imagine the things that they come up. Make a fake account. "Oh, I'm gonna joke that she's broken up with her boyfriend," or I'm gonna, and they think it's totally harmless, and it
Yeah.
can be totally harmful.
Yeah. No,
So
that's right.
and so again, this is like an awareness for the kids, but also for the parents, and also this knowledge that please come to me if you're upset. Don't sit alone with it.
Yeah.
And so I think it's like, again, this idea of reframing, it's not all bad. We can be better at focusing on the good. Don't say no, say no. I encourage everybody to take that step and try them out.
Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you wanted to make sure that parents knew, or any one big takeaway that you want parents to have?
Well, I mean, our sort of tagline for raising digital citizens is don't say no, say no.
Yeah.
KNOW. So I think what we are urging many parents is to understand that it's totally reasonable. We need a lot of legislation. I'm a big proponent of not having phones in schools. I am a big proponent of free play, as you know, and
Mm-hmm.
as much as you can, having a screen-free childhood and all of that. But I think we need less talk about banning and more talk about balance. And I think parents are in a cycle where they're feeling shamed, and they're feeling a bad parent all the time if they are living in the digital world, which again, it's not going away. It is here to stay. We want to give our kids opportunities in life. And sometimes, like, maybe this is a little controversial to compare it, but if you look at like hunter-gatherer societies, or you look at some of these, children had to play with the tools that they were going to grow up with.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much research that shows a lot of positive things about gaming. There's a lot of positive research. You just don't hear about it very often.
Yeah, I agree. I thank you so much for introducing me to them as well, because I think it's really opened up my way of thinking, and that it is all about balance. It's not going away, and I appreciate you putting those out there for everyone to benefit from. So
Cute.
I'm so grateful to have this, because before I was the parent that was like, no, technology bad, this and that. But then you really opened my mind up too. Say, it isn't all bad. And if I don't have that conversation, then it's going to create a further divide, and my kids will talk to me less about what's going on in their life.
Honestly, you've just made my day.
If you know someone who'd be a great fit for the show, come on over to ingeniousbaby.com and share your tips and story ideas. You are your baby's first and best teacher.